The massive ship came out of nowhere. One moment the space around Earth was empty and quiet. The next moment 3 enormous ships appeared near Jupiter like dark mountains floating in the black. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the alarms started screaming. He ran to the command center of the Earth Defense Station, his boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. His heart was beating fast. This was what they had all been waiting for and dreading at the same time. "What do we have?" Jake asked as he reached his chair. Lieutenant Amy Foster looked up from her screen. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking a little. 3 ships, sir. They're huge. Each one is about 10 miles long. They just appeared out of nothing. Jake stared at the main screen. The ships looked like giant insects made of dark metal. They had sharp edges and strange curves that hurt to look at. They were moving slowly toward Earth, and Jake could feel danger coming from them like heat from a fire. "Any signals?" he asked. Amy nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. They're sending something. It's not words but numbers, math problems and pictures. Our computers are working on it now." On the biggest Vorthak ship, Commander Zektar stood in his command room. He was 8 feet tall with skin like black stone and arms that could crush steel. His red eyes looked at the small blue planet ahead of them. This would be easy. It was always easy. The Vorthak had taken over 17 worlds in the past 100 years. Every time was the same. They would arrive, show their power, and the weak species would give up or die. These humans looked even weaker than most. They had only just learned to split atoms and barely knew how to fly between planets. "What do the scouts tell us?" Zektar asked his second-in-command, a smaller Vorthak named Thekmar. "The humans have small weapons and slow ships. They fight among themselves often. They should surrender quickly when they see our power." Zektar made a sound like grinding rocks, which was how the Vorthak laughed. "Good. We will take their world before the sun sets on their largest city. Send the demand message." Back on Earth, Amy was reading the translation that the computers had made. Her face went white as she understood what the aliens were saying. "Sir," she said in a quiet voice, "they want us to surrender. They say we have 1 day to give up our planet or they will take it by force." Jake felt cold anger fill his chest. He had spent his whole life protecting Earth and the people on it. His wife and 2 children were down there on the surface, probably having breakfast and getting ready for school and work. They had no idea that monsters from space were demanding their world. "Send a message back," Jake said. His voice was calm, but Amy could hear the steel in it. "Tell them that Earth belongs to humans. If they want it, they'll have to take it." Amy's fingers moved over her keyboard. She sent the message in the same math language the aliens had used. Then she waited. On the Vorthak ship, Thekmar brought the human response to Zektar. The big commander read it and made that grinding laugh sound again. "They refuse," he said. "How interesting. It has been many years since a species was stupid enough to fight us. This might actually be fun." But something in the human message bothered Zektar. Most species that refused to surrender did it with big words about honor and glory. The humans had simply said no. Like someone had asked them for something that belonged to them, and they had politely declined. It was strange. Jake was calling all the Earth defense ships back to home. There were only 42 ships in the whole fleet, and most of them were small and fast rather than big and strong. But they were crewed by humans, and humans had been fighting impossible battles for thousands of years. Dr. Lisa Parker was working in her lab when the emergency call came. She was a scientist who studied alien life, though until today there had been no aliens to study. Now she was being asked to help the military understand an enemy that was completely unknown. She looked at the pictures of the alien ships that the telescopes had taken. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like deadly flowers made of metal and darkness. The creatures who built them had to be very advanced and very dangerous. "What do you think?" Jake asked her when she arrived at the command center. "They're hunters," Lisa said after studying the ship designs. "Look at the way they're built. Sharp points, heavy armor, weapons that stick out like claws. These aren't explorers or traders. They're designed for war." Jake nodded. He had thought the same thing. "Can we fight them?" Lisa was quiet for a moment. She looked at the small human ships on the screen, then at the giant alien vessels. It looked impossible, but humans had done impossible things before. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I know humans. We're stubborn, we don't give up easy, and we're really good at learning fast when our backs are against the wall." On the planet's surface, people were starting to panic. The news had broken about the alien ships. Some people were running away from cities. Others were gathering in churches and temples to pray. But many people were doing something that surprised the watching aliens. They were volunteering to fight. Zektar watched the human planet through his ship's sensors. He expected to see chaos and fear. Instead, he saw something strange. The humans were organizing. Small ships were flying up from the surface. Weapons platforms were powering up. Radio messages were flying back and forth in patterns that looked like military planning. "They're actually going to fight us," Tekkamar said in surprise. Zektar's red eyes narrowed. "So it seems. How curious. Their ships are tiny and their weapons are weak. Do they not understand that we could destroy their entire planet if we wished? Maybe they're too primitive to understand," suggested another Vorthak warrior. But Zektar wasn't so sure. He had fought many battles against many species. Usually, primitive creatures either ran away or attacked wildly without thinking. These humans were doing neither. They were being careful and smart about it. Jake was in the middle of the biggest challenge of his life. He had less than a day to prepare for a battle against enemies who were bigger, stronger, and more advanced than anything humans had ever faced. But he had advantages too, even if he didn't know it yet. He had Amy, who was the best communications officer in the fleet and could think faster than most computers. He had Lisa, who could figure out alien behavior just by looking at their ships. He had 42 ship crews who would follow him into hell if he asked them to. Most importantly, he had something the Vorthak had never encountered before. He had humans who refused to quit, no matter how bad things looked. As the sun set on Earth, both sides prepared for battle. The Vorthak expected a quick victory against a weak species. The humans prepared to prove them wrong. Neither side knew that this fight would change both of their civilizations forever. The strongest Deathworld species in known space was about to learn what it really meant to be strong. The first shot came at dawn. A beam of red light shot out from the biggest Vorthak ship and hit one of the human defense stations. The station exploded in a ball of fire and metal pieces. Jake Morrison watched from his command ship as 12 good people died in seconds. "Return fire," he ordered. His voice was calm, but his hands were tight fists. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Missiles streaked through space like angry hornets. Laser beams cut through the darkness. Railguns shot metal slugs at incredible speed. The weapons hit the Vorthak ships and bounced off like raindrops hitting a mountain. Commander Zektar watched the human attack with amusement. Their weapons were so weak they barely scratched his ship's armor. This would be over in minutes. But then something strange happened. The human ships scattered. Most species fought in neat lines or groups. They stayed together and tried to overpower their enemies with big weapons and heavy armor. But the humans broke apart like a school of fish when a shark appears. They went in all directions at once. "What are they doing?" asked Tekkamar, confused. Zektar frowned. The human ships were moving in patterns he had never seen before. They were fast and unpredictable. One moment a human ship would be shooting at his left side. The next moment it would be behind him shooting at his engines. Colonel Ryan Blake was commanding the human fleet from his ship, the Liberty. He had studied every battle the human race had ever fought. He knew that when you are smaller and weaker than your enemy, you don't fight fair. You fight smart. "Alpha Group, hit their sensors," he ordered into his radio. "Beta Group, target their weapon ports. Charlie Group, make them chase you around the moon." The human pilots followed his orders perfectly. They had trained for this kind of fight their whole careers. Not the fair fight between equal opponents, but the desperate fight between the weak and the strong. The kind of fight humans had been winning for thousands of years. Amy Foster was flying her own small fighter ship now. All the big command ships were staying back, but the fighters were getting close to the alien vessels. She could see the huge ships up close, and they were even more frightening than she had imagined. But Amy wasn't thinking about fear. She was thinking about her job. Her fighter carried a special bomb that could stick to enemy ships. She just had to get close enough to plant it. A Vorthak weapon beam almost cut her ship in half. She spun her fighter around and dove toward the alien ship's surface. The enemy weapons couldn't turn fast enough to track her when she got really close. Come on," she whispered to herself as she flew along the alien ship's hull. She was looking for the right spot, the place Dr. Lisa Parker had told her to find. There it was, a small opening that looked like it might be an air vent. Amy pressed the button that released her bomb. The magnetic device stuck to the alien ship with a soft click. "Bomb planted," she reported as she flew away as fast as her engines could push her. On the Vorthak ship, alarms started ringing. Zektar looked at his damage reports in confusion. The humans had somehow gotten explosives onto his ship. That should have been impossible. Their weapons were too weak to get through his armor, but they hadn't tried to get through the armor. They had found a way around it. The explosion was small, but it was in exactly the right place. It knocked out the ship's main sensor array. Suddenly, Zektar was fighting blind. How did they know where to hit us? Thekmar demanded. Zektar didn't have an answer. The humans shouldn't have known anything about Vorthak's ship design, yet somehow they had found the one weak spot that could cause maximum damage with a small bomb. Dr. Lisa Parker was back on Earth, studying every piece of information they could get about the alien ships. She had figured out something important. The Vorthak ships were built like fortresses. They were designed to fight other big, strong enemies in straight-up battles, but humans didn't fight like that. Humans fought like insects fighting giants. They stung and ran away. They found weak spots and exploited them. They turned the enemy's strength against itself. "Jake," she said into her radio, "their ships are too big. That's their weakness. They can't turn fast and they have blind spots. Get your people to attack from multiple directions at once. Make them choose which target to shoot at." Jake smiled grimly. "You heard the lady," he told his fleet. "Swarm tactics. Hit them from everywhere at once." The human ships came at the Vorthak vessels like angry bees. They attacked from above and below, from the sides and the rear. Every time the aliens turned to face one group of attackers, another group hit them from behind. Lieutenant Commander Tony Rodriguez was leading a boarding party toward one of the smaller Vorthak ships. It had been damaged by the swarm attacks and was leaking air. Tony and his team used magnetic boots to walk on the ship's hull while wearing spacesuits. "Remember," Tony told his team through the radio, "these aliens are bigger and stronger than us. Don't try to fight them hand to hand. Use your brains and your tools." They found an airlock that had been damaged in the fighting. Tony's team cut through the weakened metal with plasma torches. Soon they were inside the alien ship. The inside was dark and smelled like metal and something else Tony couldn't identify. The corridors were big enough for the 8-foot-tall aliens, which made them feel like tunnels to the humans. "Stay together," Tony whispered. "Remember the plan. The plan was simple. Plant explosives on important systems and get out. Don't try to hold territory or fight pitched battles. Hit hard and disappear." They moved through the ship like ghosts. When they heard alien voices, they hid. When they found important-looking equipment, they planted bombs. When they had to fight, they used surprise and superior weapons to win quickly. Back in space, the battle was turning into something Zektar had never experienced before. His ships were bigger and stronger, but the humans were making that work against him. Every time he fired his big weapons, the humans were already somewhere else. Worse, the human weapons were starting to add up. Each hit was small, but there were so many of them. "It was like being killed by 1,000 paper cuts, Commander," one of his officers reported. "We're detecting explosions inside Ship 3. Someone got aboard. Zektar's blood ran cold. No enemy had ever boarded a Vorthak ship during battle. Their armor was too strong and their weapons too powerful. Yet somehow these small, weak humans had gotten inside. Tony and his team were fighting their way back to their entry point. They had planted all their explosives and now they needed to escape before the bombs went off. But 3 Vorthak warriors had found them. The aliens were huge and terrifying, with claws that could cut through steel and reflexes faster than any human. In a fair fight, one Vorthak could kill 5 humans easily, but Tony didn't believe in fair fights. "Flashbang now," he shouted. One of his team members threw a grenade that exploded with blinding light and deafening sound. The Vorthak warriors stumbled, their enhanced senses overwhelmed by the assault. Tony's team shot them with high-powered rifles while they were confused. It wasn't honorable, but it worked. They escaped just as their bombs exploded. The Vorthak ship shuddered and began to drift dead in space. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak were losing a battle. Not because their enemies were stronger, but because their enemies refused to fight by the rules the Vorthak understood. Zektar stared at his displays in shock. These humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They were sneaky and creative and absolutely refused to give up no matter how bad things looked. "Sir?" Thekmar said quietly. "Perhaps we should retreat and come back with more ships." The word retreat had never been spoken on a Vorthak command bridge before. But as Zektar watched another of his ships go dark, he realized that these humans had taught him something new. Sometimes the strongest fighter isn't the one with the biggest muscles. Sometimes it's the one who refuses to quit. Commander Zektar sat in his damaged command room and watched the humans fight. For 3 days now, the battle had continued and nothing was going as it should. The Vorthak should have won on the first day. Their ships were bigger, their weapons stronger, their armor thicker. Yet somehow they were losing. He had ordered his warriors to study the human battle recordings. What they found made no sense to Vorthak thinking. The humans did things that went against every rule of war the Vorthak knew. When human ships were badly damaged, instead of retreating to safety, they flew straight at Vorthak vessels and exploded themselves. The pilots jumped out in escape pods at the last second, but they used their dying ships as weapons. No warrior culture Zektar knew would waste valuable ships that way. When human fighters ran out of ammunition, they didn't withdraw. They grabbed metal debris floating in space and threw it at enemy ships using their engines. They turned space junk into bullets. It was crude and desperate, but it worked. Most confusing of all, when human commanders saw their people in danger, they risked everything to save them. Zektar watched one recording where an entire human squadron flew into enemy fire to rescue a single damaged ship. They lost 3 ships to save 1 pilot. Why did they do this? Zektar asked his science officer, Netara. It makes no tactical sense. 1 warrior's life should not be worth 3 ships. Netara had been studying human communications. She was smaller than most Vorthak, with blue-green skin instead of black. Her job was to understand alien thinking, but humans puzzled her more than any species she had encountered. I think, she said carefully, that humans do not see their people as just warriors. They see them as family. Zektar made his grinding laugh sound, but there was no humor in it. Family in battle? That is weakness. But even as he said it, Zektar wondered, if it was weakness, why were the humans winning? On Earth, Dr. Karen Wells was working day and night to understand why humans fought so differently from other species. She was an expert on how people behaved under extreme stress, and this was the ultimate test of human nature. She had studied every battle recording they could get. What she saw amazed her. Humans in impossible situations didn't break down or give up. They got creative. They found solutions that shouldn't exist. They turned disasters into victories through sheer stubbornness. We're dealing with a species that has never faced real adversity, she told Jake Morrison during a brief rest between battles. The Vorthak are apex predators from their world. They've always been the strongest, the fastest, the most dangerous. They've never had to adapt or improvise. Jake rubbed his tired eyes. He hadn't slept in 2 days, but his mind was still sharp. And we have? Every day of our evolution, Karen said. Humans survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, droughts, floods, and plagues. We're not the strongest or fastest species on our own planet. We survived by being the most adaptable, by never giving up when things looked hopeless. Meanwhile, on the Vorthak ship, a wounded warrior named Thekmar was having thoughts that would have been impossible a week ago. He had been injured when humans somehow got explosives onto his ship's bridge. The blast had broken several of his ribs and damaged his left arm, but the humans hadn't left him to die. When they found him unconscious in the wreckage, they had given him medical aid. Enemy soldiers had stopped their mission to help a wounded Vorthak warrior. Why? Thekmar had asked to see the recording of his rescue. In it, he watched a human medic named Sam Turner risk his life to pull Thekmar from the burning wreckage. Turner could have left him there and continued with the mission. Instead, he spent precious minutes treating Thekmar's wounds. Why did you help me? Thekmar asked through the translation device when he was finally able to speak to Turner. Turner was being held as a prisoner on the Vorthak ship, but he didn't seem afraid. He looked tired and sad, but not broken. Because you were hurt, he said simply. It's what we do. But I am your enemy. I would have killed you if I could. Turner nodded. Maybe. But when I saw you lying there bleeding, you weren't my enemy. You were just someone who needed help. Thekmar stared at the small human. This made no sense by Vorthak thinking. Enemies were enemies. You killed them or they killed you. There was no middle ground, but Turner had created a middle ground where none should exist. Back in space, Colonel Ryan Blake was leading another attack on the Vorthak fleet. His strategy was wearing them down slowly like water dripping on stone. Each attack was small, but together they were breaking the enemy's strength. Alpha Team, hit their communications array, he ordered. Beta Team, target their engine cooling systems. Gamma Team, make some noise on their other side to keep them busy. The human ships moved like a school of fish, each one knowing exactly where the others were going. They had been working together for so long that they could coordinate complex attacks without even talking to each other. Amy Foster was piloting her fighter through a maze of debris and laser fire. She had become one of the best pilots in the human fleet, not because she was naturally talented, but because she refused to give up learning. Every mistake taught her something new. Every failure made her stronger. She was chasing a small Vorthak scout ship that was trying to escape back to the main fleet. The alien ship was faster than hers, but Amy knew something the pilot didn't. She had been studying how Vorthak ships moved, and she had noticed a pattern. The alien pilot always turned right when he was surprised. Amy fired a burst of laser fire to the left of the enemy ship. As she expected, the pilot turned right, straight into the path of Amy's real attack. Her missiles hit the scout ship and disabled its engines. Instead of destroying the crippled ship, Amy did something that confused the Vorthak even more. She called for a rescue ship to pick up the enemy pilot. On the main Vorthak vessel, Zektar watched this happen with growing bewilderment. The humans kept capturing his warriors instead of killing them. They gave medical treatment to wounded enemies. They risked their own lives to save Vorthak pilots who had been trying to kill them moments before. "What do they want with our prisoners?" he asked Natara. Natara had been talking to some of the captured Vorthak warriors. What she learned disturbed her. "They ask them questions," she said, "but not about military secrets. They ask about our families, our homes, our culture. They seem to want to understand us." Zektar felt something he had never experienced before: confusion about his own nature. The Vorthak way was simple. Strong conquered weak. Winners took everything from losers. There was no room for mercy or curiosity about enemies, but the humans were proving that there were other ways to be. Strong Dr. Lisa Parker was analyzing all the information they had gathered about Vorthak behavior. She had made a discovery that changed how she saw the entire war. "They're not evil," she told Jake during a strategy meeting. "They're just limited. Look at their tactics. They do the same things over and over. They don't adapt or change their strategy when it isn't working." Jake looked at the battle reports. Lisa was right. The Vorthak fought the same way in every engagement. They relied on superior firepower and armor, but when that didn't work, they didn't know what else to do. They're like a chess player who only knows one opening move, Jake realized. When we counter it, they don't know how to respond. But Lisa had found something even more important. "I think they're looking for something," she said. "Look at how they study our battles. They're not just trying to win anymore. They're trying to understand how we do what we do." As the fourth day of fighting began, both sides had learned things about each other that neither expected. The humans had learned that the Vorthak weren't mindless destroyers, but warriors searching for something they had lost. The Vorthak had learned that strength came in many forms, and sometimes the weakest-looking enemy was actually the strongest. Commander Zektar stood before the recording of Captain Jake Morrison's latest message. The human leader wasn't demanding surrender or threatening destruction. Instead, he was asking a simple question: why are we fighting? For the first time in his life, Zektar realized he didn't have a good answer. Sergeant Kevin Hayes never expected his supply run to Saturn's moon Titan to change the course of two civilizations. His small cargo ship was carrying medical supplies to the mining station there when the Vorthak plasma blast hit his engines. The ship spun out of control and crashed into the frozen surface of the moon. Kevin crawled out of the wreckage with a broken arm and a head full of stars. His radio was dead, his ship was burning, and he was stranded on a moon that the Vorthak had captured 3 days ago. He should have been terrified, but Kevin Hayes had grown up in the slums of Detroit. He knew how to survive when everything went wrong. He found a cave in the ice cliffs and made a shelter using pieces from his crashed ship. He had enough food for maybe a week and a small heater that might last 2 days. After that, he would freeze to death in the -200-degree cold. But Kevin didn't plan to die quietly. Commander Zektar was on Titan personally, studying the human mining equipment. He wanted to understand how such a weak species had built machines that worked so well in hostile environments. The human tools were simpler than Vorthak technology, but they were also more reliable and easier to fix. That's when his scouts found the crash site. "There's a survivor," reported his lieutenant. "One human male. He's hiding in the ice caves about 2 miles from here." Zektar was curious. Most species either died quickly in hostile environments or waited for rescue. What was this human doing to stay alive? He found Kevin 3 days after the crash. The human had built an amazing shelter using nothing but crashed debris and ice. He had created a water recycling system from broken pipes, a heating system from the ship's power cells, and even a small garden using dirt from potted plants that had survived the crash. Kevin was sitting by a tiny fire, roasting something that smelled terrible but was probably edible. When he saw the 8-foot-tall alien warrior approaching, he stood up slowly. His broken arm was in a makeshift sling and he was obviously weak from hunger and cold, but he wasn't begging for mercy or trying to run away. He just stood there and waited. "You are the crashed pilot," Zektar said through his translation device. "That's me," Kevin replied. "I guess you're here to finish the job." Zektar studied the human's shelter with professional interest. "How long have you been here?" 3 days, give or take. "In this cold with these injuries, you should be dead." Kevin shrugged. "Yeah, well, I've always been too stubborn to die when I'm supposed to." Something in the human's voice made Zektar pause. There was no fear, no desperation, just a tired acceptance mixed with quiet defiance. This was not how defeated enemies were supposed to behave. "Why aren't you afraid?" Zektar asked. Kevin thought about that for a moment. "I am afraid," he said honestly. "I'm scared I'll never see my wife and kids again. I'm scared I'll die before I can tell them I love them one more time. But being afraid doesn't change anything. I can't fly away or fight you off, so I might as well make the best of it." Zektar had captured thousands of prisoners in his career. They all acted the same way. They begged, or they raged, or they tried to bargain. This human was doing something completely different. He was accepting his situation while refusing to give up hope. Instead of killing Kevin, Zektar made a decision that surprised even himself. He ordered his warriors to bring the human to their temporary base as a prisoner. On the Vorthak base, Kevin found himself in a cell that was actually warmer and more comfortable than his ice cave. The aliens gave him food and medical treatment for his broken arm. It wasn't kindness, Kevin realized. It was curiosity. Nadara, the Vorthak science officer, came to talk to him every day. She was learning human language with amazing speed, and she asked him questions that had nothing to do with military secrets. "Why do humans help their weak?" she asked one day. Kevin was carving a small toy horse from a piece of wood, using a knife the guards had let him keep. His daughter Lucy loved horses, and making the toy helped him feel connected to home. "What do you mean?" he asked without looking up from his work. "In battle, we have observed humans risk many lives to save one injured warrior. This is inefficient. The logical action is to let the weak die and preserve the strong." Kevin stopped carving and looked at her. "That's not how we see it. We don't think anyone is weak or strong. We just think everyone matters. But some humans are clearly superior fighters. Some are smarter or faster. Some contribute more to society. Are they not more valuable?" Kevin smiled sadly. "My daughter Lucy is 8 years old. She has trouble reading and she's afraid of her own shadow. By your thinking, she's completely worthless. But she's the most important thing in my universe. Not because of what she can do, but because of who she is." Natara stared at him. "This makes no logical sense." "Love usually doesn't," Kevin said, returning to his carving. "But it makes us stronger anyway." Back in space, the war had changed. Both sides were still fighting, but now they were also talking. Captain Jake Morrison had opened communication channels with Commander Zektar, and what started as military negotiations had become something stranger. Dr. Susan Clark was leading the psychological team trying to understand Vorthak behavior. She had made a breakthrough that changed everything. The Vorthak weren't conquerors in the way humans understood the word. They were more like hunters searching for worthy prey. "They've become too successful," she explained to Jake during a video conference. "They've conquered so many worlds that nothing challenges them anymore. Their entire culture is built around being tested in battle, but they've eliminated all the tests." Jake understood immediately. "They're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to find something they've lost." "Exactly. They're looking for opponents who can teach them something new, species that fight in ways they've never seen before. We're not their enemies. We're their teachers." Meanwhile, on Titan, Kevin and Zektar were having conversations that would have been impossible a month ago. The Vorthak commander had started visiting Kevin personally, asking questions about human nature that revealed more about Vorthak culture than Kevin had expected. "Your species is dying," Kevin said one day, startling Zektar with his directness. "We are the strongest species in known space," Zektar replied stiffly. "Physically, sure. But strength isn't just about muscles and weapons. Your people have forgotten why they fight. They win battles, but they don't know what they're winning for." Kevin had noticed something during his time as a prisoner. The Vorthak warriors went through their duties perfectly, but there was no joy in what they did. They were like machines following programming rather than living beings pursuing goals. "We fight to prove our strength," Zektar said. "To who? You've already proved you're the strongest. You've beaten everyone. What's left to prove?" Zektar was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, "What do humans fight for?" Kevin thought about his wife making breakfast in their little kitchen, his son learning to ride a bicycle, his daughter drawing pictures of horses, all the small, precious things that made life worth living. "We fight for each other," he said. "We fight to protect the things we love. We fight so our children can grow up in a better world than we did. And if you cannot win, then we fight anyway. Because giving up means everything we love dies with us." Zektar felt something crack open in his chest, a feeling he had no words for. The humans had shown him something he thought was impossible. They had found a way to be strong without becoming empty. That night, he sent a message to his fleet. For the first time in Vorthak history, a commander was calling for a ceasefire not because he was losing, but because he was learning. The message was simple. We must talk. The meeting took place on a small space station halfway between Earth and the Vorthak fleet. Admiral Jake Morrison, who had been promoted after leading the successful defense of Earth, sat across from Commander Zektar in a room that had been specially built for this moment. The table between them was made of materials from both their worlds. Jake looked at the alien commander and saw something he hadn't expected. Zektar looked tired but not defeated. There was something new in his red eyes, something that looked almost like hope. "You called for this meeting," Jake said. "What do you want to discuss?" Zektar was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Your species has shown us something we had forgotten. We came here to conquer you, but instead you have conquered something in us. I don't understand. For generations, the Vorthak have been the strongest. We have won every battle, taken every world we desired. But victory without challenge became meaningless. We were dying slowly, not from disease or war, but from emptiness." Jake leaned forward. This wasn't what he had expected from a surrender negotiation. "And now? Now we have fought an enemy that showed us what true strength looks like. You were weaker than us in every measurable way, yet you refused to lose. You found ways to win that we could never imagine. You have something we need to learn." Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's new ambassador to alien species, joined the meeting the next day. She had studied every recording of human-Vorthak interactions, and she had an idea that could change everything. "What if we helped each other?" she asked both leaders. "You have technology we need. We have something you need even more. What could we possibly need from humans?" Zektar asked, though his tone was curious rather than insulting. "The will to keep fighting when everything looks hopeless. The ability to find new solutions to old problems. The knowledge that strength comes from more than just weapons and armor." The negotiations took weeks. Both sides had to overcome centuries of thinking about warfare and conquest. But slowly, an agreement took shape that neither species had ever imagined before. The Vorthak would share their advanced technology with humanity. In return, humans would teach the Vorthak how to fight like humans. Not just the tactics and strategies, but the spirit behind them, the refusal to give up, the creativity that turned weakness into strength, the bonds that made warriors fight for each other instead of just for victory. Kevin Hayes was released and returned to Earth as a hero, but he wasn't finished with the Vorthak. He volunteered to be part of the first cultural exchange program. Along with 50 other humans, he would live on Vorthak ships and teach their warriors what he had tried to explain to Zektar on Titan. The first joint training exercise was held in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Human pilots flew alongside Vorthak warriors, teaching them tactics that had won the war. But more importantly, they taught them why those tactics worked. Amy Foster found herself training with a Vorthak pilot named Kreshamar. He was young by Vorthak standards, only about 60 years old. And he was eager to learn human fighting methods. "Why do you scatter when attacked?" he asked after their first practice battle. "It seems like cowardice," Amy smiled. "Try to catch a swarm of bees with your bare hands. Then ask me that question again." They ran the simulation again. This time, Kreshamar was hunting Amy's fighter through an asteroid field. He was faster and stronger. His ship was better armored and his weapons were more powerful. By every logical measure, he should have won easily. But Amy didn't fight logically. She used the asteroids as cover, leading him into narrow spaces where his big ship couldn't maneuver. She bounced laser beams off metal surfaces to hit him from impossible angles. When her weapons ran out of ammunition, she grabbed a small asteroid with her ship's magnetic grapples and threw it at him. Kreshmar's ship was hit by the spinning rock and sent tumbling. When he regained control, Amy was gone, hidden somewhere in the asteroid field. "This is impossible," he muttered. "My ship is superior in every way." "That's your problem," Amy's voice came over the radio. "You're thinking like your ship is all you have. I'm thinking like the whole universe is my weapon." She was right. Kreshmar had been trying to win with his ship's advantages. Amy had been using everything around her, turning the environment itself into her ally. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Parker was working with Vorthak scientists to understand both species better. What she discovered amazed her. The Vorthak had evolved as perfect predators on a world where only the strongest survived. But that perfection had become a trap. "They're too specialized," she explained to Sarah Kim. "Like a knife that's so sharp it can only cut one thing. Humans evolved as generalists. We're not the best at anything, but we're good enough at everything." The real breakthrough came when Thekmar, the Vorthak warrior who had been rescued by human medic Sam Turner, asked to work with human soldiers. He wanted to understand why they had saved him instead of leaving him to die. Sam Turner volunteered to train with him. The two had developed an unlikely friendship during Thekmar's recovery. Now they were learning to fight together instead of against each other. "Your people risk everything to save one warrior," Thekmar said during a training break. "This seems inefficient." Sam cleaned his rifle while he talked. "Maybe. But when we do that, every other warrior knows we'll do the same for them. They fight harder because they know we won't abandon them. But what if saving one means losing many? Then we find a way to save them all. And if we can't, we try anyway. Because the moment we start deciding who's worth saving and who isn't, we stop being human." Thekmar thought about this for a long time. In Vorthak culture, the strong protected themselves and the weak were left behind. It was efficient and logical. But watching humans fight, he had seen something that efficiency couldn't explain. When humans fought for each other, they became stronger than their individual parts. The change in Vorthak culture was slow but undeniable. Warriors who trained with humans began to show creativity they had never displayed before. They started working together instead of just fighting alongside each other. They learned to use their environment and their tools in new ways. More importantly, they rediscovered the joy of facing a real challenge. Commander Zektar, now calling himself Cultural Exchange Commander, spent months learning from Jake Morrison. The human admiral taught him something that changed his entire understanding of leadership. "A good commander doesn't just give orders," Jake explained as they watched joint human Vorthak patrols training together. "He gives his people a reason to want to follow those orders." "And what reason do you give them?" Jake pointed to the mixed crews working together below them. Humans and Vorthak were learning each other's languages, sharing stories, and slowly becoming something neither species had been before. "I tell them we're building something better than what we had before, not just for us, but for everyone who comes after us." The alliance between Earth and the Vorthak Empire became legendary throughout the galaxy. Other civilizations heard stories of the species that had been conquered by their own enemies. Not through defeat, but through transformation. When new threats appeared from the depths of space, they found Earth and the Vorthak worlds protected by something unprecedented. Human creativity and determination had merged with Vorthak strength and technology. The defenders were neither fully human nor fully Vorthak, but something new and powerful. Kevin Hayes, now an instructor at the first human Vorthak military academy, often told his mixed classes of young warriors from both species the same thing. The strongest person isn't the one who never falls down. It's the one who gets back up every time, learns from the fall, and teaches others how to get back up too. The Vorthak had sought to transform humanity through conquest. Instead, both species had been transformed through understanding. They had learned that true strength wasn't about being the biggest or the toughest. It was about never giving up, never stop learning, and never fighting alone. The universe was vast and full of challenges, but they would face it together. The species that refused to quit and the species that learned from them how to find meaning and struggle once again. Both civilizations had become something greater than they ever could have been alone.